Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and this is our multi-tester review of the Garmin Instinct 2. So before getting into our initial run testing, what do you need to know about the Garmin Instinct 2 from a runner's perspective? Let's start with design, and the Instinct 2 comes in a lot of different models. There's two size options now, with the larger Instinct 2 coming in with a 45mm case and measures in at 14.5mm thick. The original Instinct and Instinct Solar featured a 45mm case at 15.3mm thick, so it's a little slimmer this time. There's also now a smaller Instinct 2S, which features a 40mm case and measures in at 13.3mm thick. The one we're testing is the larger Instinct 2. You have model options here as well. There's a standard Instinct 2 and 2S, and then you've got solar versions, Camo Edition, Surf and Tactical Editions here too. Both have polymer cases, with the standard Instinct 2 and 2S offering strengthened glass lenses and the solar versions packing Garmin's Power Glass lenses. Screen-wise, you're getting a 0.79-inch 56 by 156 resolution transflected display on the 2S and a larger 0.9-inch 176 by 176 resolution one on the larger Instinct 2. That's the same size as the Instinct Solar but a higher resolution display. On the software front, Garmin has moved to the Glances UI it's adopted for its most recent watches. In terms of the key new running software features, you're getting more in the way of training and performance metrics. You can track VO2 max estimates, fitness age, and get advice on ideal recovery time. There's now training status, load and effect insights on the watch, and you get daily suggested workouts as well. Garmin is also adding its incident detection safety feature, which works when paired to Garmin's Connect phone app. Other new features worth highlighting here are that you now get access to Garmin's Connect IQ store, Garmin Pay to make contactless payments, but only on the Instinct 2 and 2S Solar editions. In terms of battery life, here's a breakdown of what Garmin claims. We've matched up the 2 and 2S Solar and non-solar numbers alongside the Instinct and Instinct Solar ones. The highlights here being that smartwatch, GPS battery life, and using it in expedition mode has seen notable increases. Those unlimited claims will of course entirely depend on spending a fair amount of time outside putting the Garmin Power Glass lens to good use to reach it. Price-wise, we only have the UK prices for now, and the Instinct 2 pricing starts at $299.99, moving to $389.99 for the Solar version. That's the same pricing for the Instinct 2S. Surf and Tactical Editions will see the price rise up to $429.99 depending on whether you go solar or non-solar. Okay, so let's talk about the design of the Instinct 2. Nick, we're going to start with you. How did you get on with this watch? How did it compare to the previous Instinct watches?
There have been some changes in design, but for me they were so minimal that I didn't really notice them in terms of actual use. Like it's a comfortable, light watch to wear for long periods. Personally, the design, I just don't really like the design very much. Like, it's clearly a design that people either like or dislike, and I think a lot more people will like it, but I prefer the kind of sleeker, kind of flatter looks of things like the Forerunners and stuff like that. But yeah, Tom, you like a chunky watch, don't you? So
I love the design of. I was a massive fan of the original Instinct design. I think it's just very simple, very nice, no frills. It just does the job. But I actually do think that the screen does have quite a lot of information on it at a general level. It's not going to compete with something like the Phoenix, where there's actually you can modify it to be really useful. But I think it's fine. I think it's got all it needs on it, and I just think it looks like a really nice, simple watch.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's one of the more unique looking kind of watches in Garmin's collection. I think the main things that are really kind of stood out for me in terms of what's different, I think it is a little bit slimmer. It's not massively, doesn't really drastically change the experience. The screen resolution is supposed to be better. It's not something that I really kind of noticed in my time with it. The only thing I would say that I kind of really noticed from my runs is that obviously you've got that Power Glass kind of lens on there, and I think it's more noticeable when you're on the watch than it has been on previous ones. But it just means you're going to get more battery life. In terms of the experience of reading the data, I don't think it's massively changed. I quite like it. I quite like the look of it. I prefer some of the brighter looking colours. But it's a nice light watch. It's all polymer for on this watch, and there's nothing to kind of weigh you down in terms of the materials. So for me, I quite like it, and not very different from the original Instinct. But I think sticking to what was on there, I think it's not a massive issue for me. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is running performance. So, Tom, we'll start with you first. How did you find in terms of running with the Instinct 2?
So, I think that it's fine. It works on the same principle as most of the Garmin watches that I've tested. So, actually just setting it to run is very simple to do. When you're using it at a general level, I think that it does the job perfectly. I think when you start using the more advanced features, and there are a lot more advanced features in this watch, it can become a bit complicated just to sort of, set a course and things like that. So I did find the more advanced features are sort of hidden in some of the menu systems. So I did find that a bit trickier. The other thing I would say is on the run as well. And this is, as I was saying before, I quite like the design. But when you get to the run, it's difficult to see all the information on this watch. So as well with something like the Phoenix, which you very clearly see the pace and everything, you know where it is. In this, it's a little bit harder to see. So and also navigate through the screens, I did find trickier as well. So it's not amazing for me on the run. It does the job. It tracks fine, but it's not a great experience if you really want to see lots of different data sets when you're running.
How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think it takes a bit of getting your eye in actually with the watch, almost like, because it is so different to lots of other ones. You just got to kind of remember where everything is, and when you first look at the watch, it's going to be hard to immediately pass the data you want. Yeah. But you can get your eye on it okay. And I think it's now got all those features that I really like to see on things like the Forerunner 245, all that training analysis, suggested workouts. It's all there, and it's all done in a slightly less, I would say, even like enjoyable experience, because you don't have a colour screen. But at the end of the day, all the information is there and it's not hard to use it really. And so you're getting basically a very, very full-featured watch that can do kind of everything on the run for you. I think I'd say is it didn't have track run while we were testing it, although that is due in a firmware update. So don't want to criticise it too much for that. Yeah. But yeah, it's a nice running experience, and it is pretty equivalent now to the Forerunners at the same price.
There's probably an element of this as well where the previous Instinct didn't have anywhere near as much as the features on this. So moving from the previous Instinct to this is a little bit of a shift in learning, because you expect to find all the stuff that you found in the Instinct, but there's a lot more in it. So there is a bit of a learning curve in getting to all that different features sets that you can use.
Yeah, I think just for me, I think, you have to kind of remember with the Instinct that it's primarily kind of driven or designed for kind of outdoor kind of person, but it does have those extra running features in there for me. And I do think you kind of have to accept that the display will change the experience of it a little bit, but actually I didn't find it a massive issue. Like, I think you can still see your data, but you have to kind of adjust the way that data's displayed. And actually this kind of sub-display, the way that it's kind of used and utilised for some of the other bits of information that you can get during that run, generally I think it works quite nicely. So for me, the running experience in general was actually all right for me.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of an investment. I think if you can get everything you want out of this watch, you just have to really put a bit of time in to work out how to locate it. It's not going to give you everything you want if you're looking for advanced information instantly. There's a bit of work you need to do.
Yeah, it's also great, which is quickly mentioned here again, that it's a full multi-sport watch, which you don't get from other Garmins at this price generally. And then how about accuracy? Like, we can dive into some of the stuff here, but it's obviously got the new Elevate 4 heart rate sensor. It's got basically Garmin's top sensor at the moment. Did you find heart rate good?
It seemed pretty good for me. I've tested it out at track, and it seemed to very quickly catch up with my heart rate when I was doing interval sessions on that. So I didn't really have any issues at all when it came to heart rate. I was fairly impressed with it, actually.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, this is similar experience to what I've found on kind of the Garmin Phoenixes and the Epics that we've kind of been testing recently. I think at kind of steady pace, I think it's generally very reliable. I think it kind of holds some of that high intensity stuff, but ultimately, if you want that kind of more reliable data, you pair up a chest strap sensor, and you can do that on this watch. And I haven't had a problem pairing up something.
Or if you want the best stats for when it comes to heart rate, you're going to need a heart rate sensor anyway. But I think this does the job.
Yeah. I'd say if you're going to be using all these new training analysis features, you want to get accurate heart rate data in. I get a chest strap. For general running and just vaguely using your heart rate, I found it fine actually. And I wouldn't say that about most watches. I think this has been slightly better for me than a lot of stuff I've tested lately. But even then, I still had some spikes that would throw off my training data, which, if you wanted to use that, I'd get a chest strap. And then actually, I probably had quite a similar experience with GPS. Like, for the most part, really, really strong. But I did notice, because this doesn't have the new kind of upgrade you're getting on the Epics and the Phoenix. That's fair enough. Those things like multi-GNS and multi-band tracking are kind of restricted to higher, more expensive watches at the moment, apart from Huawei, who seems to have them quite cheap. But that did lead, I had several noticeable GPS wobbles in hard situations of high buildings or trees, or if I ran a loop, which is a good way to test GPS. It actually went really badly wrong on one run, and it generally had a few problems on that. But for the most part, point-to-point runs, generally it was fine. How about you guys?
I haven't done many runs in really high populated city areas, so it's been fairly good for me. I've not had any major issues when it comes to anomalies in the GPS data. The only thing I would say about it is that we've just been out for a run now, and it did take me a bit longer to get that GPS setting to work. And I've used it in a couple of a park run and a half marathon, and I did have to plan ahead a bit to get the GPS to pick up in those races.
I did notice it at the start of a new spot. It does seem to take a little bit longer than things like the Epics to catch GPS.
Yeah, generally it's kind of been fine for me. Actually, having the Epics with me I've been able to kind of test it against that, which is obviously we've kind of been shown to be very accurate in terms of those kind of GPS tracking. I've got a kind of tried and tested area where I know it can be a bit spotty, and kind of I'm going through a kind of a bit of a town bit where there's some taller buildings, and it kind of drops off a little bit in terms of accuracy. But generally, I didn't think it was that bad. I didn't have any massive kind of major issues where I thought it really kind of wobbled for me. So it's been good. But again, I found like those kind of initial kind of runs, the GPS, picking up a GPS signal took a little bit of time, but it has improved like a lot of GPS watches do once you've kind of spent more time tracking certain areas. So. Okay, so we're going to get into battery life, and I think this is a big one, and we're kind of seeing some big improvements across Garmin's range. So, Nick, how have you found the battery life on the Instinct 2?
I think it's a really strong feature for the watch. At its price, you're not really seeing better battery than this. And I would say that, so for me, it lasted over 2 weeks. Really heavy usage. I was running every day, fiddling with it a lot because it was a new watch. And, that was in UK with just no days of sun, I think it's fair to say. So the solar, that might as well have been the non-solar version of the watch I was testing there. And that, I think, is probably the big thing for me with battery life is I don't think I'd be paying the extra for the solar, even though if you are in a certain climate, it'd be amazing to have a watch that basically never dies. I think for the most part, the Instinct 2 regular version's battery is so good that you're getting through 2 weeks of heavy use very comfortably. You could easily stretch to 3. And if you start playing around with all the modes on it, you're looking at like months kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it is the major selling point of it. As you'd probably imagine from a watch that has a screen that looks like that.
Yeah.
You're taking if you're getting this watch and you want a really beautifully designed screen and you're not bothered about battery, you're not going to get this watch.
Yeah.
This is the watch for people that want to go outdoors. They don't want to charge it all the time. As you say, I got a very similar time to you. I definitely didn't need to charge it hardly ever over the course of testing it, and the drop off was tiny after doing races and things like that. But the solar powered thing for me, fantastic feature if you're in a place where you're out in the sun all the time. If you're a hiker and you're out hiking in the mountains, that would be a fantic feature to have. It's useless for me. It's absolutely useless. I'm not going to get any sun in it, but I don't mind charging something every 2-3 weeks. I think it's completely fine.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to echo what the guys have said, I think, with solar, I mean, unless I think you've got to be out for like 3 hours a day to really kind of every day to kind of really benefit of that extra kind of, what you're going to get from solar. For me, I probably averaged out to about 2.5 weeks in terms of my testing, which I know is an improvement on Instinct, having tested that before. I did a kind of 3-hour kind of marathon training run. I had that had the Instinct 2 charged to 100%. It dropped by 10%, which that kind of works out roughly to what Garmin is claiming in terms of their GPS performance. I think it's around 30 hours. So that is, for me, it seems like it's gonna get to where Garmin kind of promises from that kind of GPS performance. So I think the battery life is an improvement. I think that will be a reason to go for this over the original if you did feel like maybe the battery life let you down a little bit. So if you're looking for a Garmin that does offer kind of bigger battery life, I found like it delivered for me. Definitely kept me away from the charge for at least maybe 2.5 weeks, I think. Okay, so we're going to talk about navigation support now. The Instinct 2 does have navigation features. So, Tom, maybe we'll start with you first. How do you find the navigation features on the Instinct 2?
I mean, they are limited to that you can upload courses into it. It's a breadcrumb trail. It's not the easiest breadcrumb trail to follow. It's as you can see from the screen. There's not a lot of real estate on there. It's black and white. But it is surprisingly good for that. What I would say with it is that I think it's more designed for sort of general route tracking. If you're out on the trails and you want a general direction of where you're going, in cities, you're turning a lot. It's very difficult to follow, I find, because it just doesn't give you that added information. I often find myself using a few times. I've just moved to Brighton. I've been using courses quite a lot to sort of work my way around the running through the streets of Brighton, and I don't know where I'm going. And when I'm using the Phoenix 6 to do that, it's very easy because you can see the buildings and everything. When using this, I do get lost still with it because I'll turn a corner and I realise that it was the street slightly before. So it's still not. It's not perfect. I think it's a guideline. I think it's a very useful feature. I think it's more of a safety feature out on the trails and things, and it's more of just to show you which way you're meant to be going, just to being very specific. But I do think it is very good, and it's certainly up there with some of the breadcrumb navigations that you get on watches with a more advanced display for me. It's very clear, and I always also find that it catches up quickly. There's no sort of delay with that the turn by turn stuff that you get in it.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's pretty solid for, again, at this kind of price point. Breadcrumb Trail is about as good as you can get. You do get track back on this, so you can follow your trail home, which is very good. But also just a pointer if you want to go. I think, like I say, on that case, it's great kind of safety features. Like, I like to go out and get lost rather than follow a trail and then just get directed vaguely home. Pairs in with the kind of new safety and assistance features they've added to the watch. But yeah, I did find it slightly hard to find the trails, having been using glorious colour maps of the Epics recently and stuff like that. So, this is an outdoor adventure watch. Maybe down the line, Garmin can find a way to get maps onto it, but the maps just wouldn't be that clear anyway. So I think it's really going to be something that kind of gets the job done, but it's never going to be their top navigation watch.
And also, if you're getting to the point where you're adding maps and that functionality in, you're going to cost more, and you're moving more towards the Phoenix series, and then you'll get that. And if you've got maps on, it's going to ruin that battery life a bit more, and that's the big selling point. So if you want this watch, I think you've got to base it on the principle that you don't want everything, you just want a bit of guidance for a long period. I mean, you can use these maps for a long time and the battery will not go down. If you use it on a lot of other devices where you're really visible, it's going to take a hit.
And you also need to get Climb Pro. It's the only other thing. I do love Climb Pro on Garmin. Analysing the climbs, I think it's fantastically useful on runs, but you do get an elevation plot, so that again can be helpful a bit.
Yeah, I did a lot. I actually did quite a few runs with the Instinct Solar just to kind of get a sense of how they kind of match up. It feels very similar in terms of my experience. The breadcrumb navigation, I think, is like Tom said, is kind of up there with the kind of other kind of watches that support that feature. I quite like the fact that when you can't kind of use a navigate feature, you do have that kind of arrow in the kind of corner that's kind of pointing you.
Nice,
that's kind of which I think is a good utilising that screen in quite a nice way.
That bit in the top right, the top right of the watch is actually one of the most useful design features on this.
Just
very smart little feature. Now they pulled it through. That's a great example.
So that's one thing that I kind of quite like, and I think that's where you're seeing a little bit more. I get a bit more appreciation of what Garmin has done with this screen. So navigation for me not massively different in terms of what you can get out there already, but for me it was okay. It's just if you've used an Epix or if you used a Phoenix, that fuller mapping support, you kind of know what you might be able to get if you spend a bit more money. But it's good. It's you can get better out there. Okay, so the thing we are getting here on the Instinct 2 that we didn't get on the original Instinct and Instinct Solar, kind of more in terms of the training analysis and features that we get on the Forerunner watches, is now being brought over to the Instinct 2. So I guess, how did you find using those features? Are they useful? Ultimately, are they good to have around on the Instinct 2? Nick, what do you think?
I think this is a great addition. I thought it was really almost unfair that Garmin kept it off this watch, in the point that if you wanted those features and wanted this design, you just couldn't have it. So I think it's a really good addition. It doesn't look as good on this watch because a lot of that stuff is color coded on like the Forerunners and the Phoenix, but that's fine. All the information is there. All this stuff you take, a little bit carefully with a pinch of salt. Use it as trends, it is useful. I think, like, the race predictions are wrong for me, but I can see that if they're trending up and down, the training, is it productive and all that. I think it's not far off being pretty much spot on. In line with what I'm obviously following a coach's training plan. And this just adds into it in a way for me just to see that, it's nice when I do peak for a race and I can see how all the mechanics of it works. And I think it's kind of the same with the suggested workouts. I don't think they're amazing. Like, as an experienced runner, I know I could probably line up my own training plan better. But if you're not that experienced or it's not that bothered, if you just followed them, you would get fitter. So I think it's a lot of new features. I think that will, maybe you're someone who's big into adventure, more of a beginner runner, all those features will work really well for you, and you're getting the watch you wanted, which is the kind of more adventurous one.
Yeah, and I think for me, the one that kind of stood out for me in terms of, I just think, again, it's a guidance, but I think it's guidance that I think can work for people. So the daily suggested workouts, whenever I did my kind of bigger runs, I always looked to see what suggested workouts they would offer. And to be honest, it would make sense if I went out and did a big, huge kind of tough run, it would tell me to do a slower, kind of easy, kind of 10-minute mile, but which, it makes sense. And if someone didn't know how to use that information, I think that's useful information to have. And it just means that it's a better running watch this time. I think that's the main thing for me. Tom, how did you kind of find in terms of those training analysis kind of additions?
Well, as I was saying to you earlier, I was very surprised the number that have been added to this watch. I've been using the Instinct for a long time, and I think I wrongly assumed when testing the Instinct 2 Solar that it would be quite similar, and there were a few new additions. There's loads of additions on here, but I think what that does is, if you're the sort of runner that really wants those additional sort of analysis systems, I don't think it's the best watch to get that information from. So it's not as easy to find some of those things. It's just not enough space in this watch to really show you off those training analysis features. But you can find it. You can find that information in there, and I think it's brilliant in the fact that it delivers all that stuff a surprisingly high amount of it. Stuff like race predictors and things like that is a massive thing that was missing. That if you had an Instinct, a previous Instinct, and you were hearing about all the people with Garmin Phoenixes talking about race prediction and stuff like that, and you just wouldn't have any of that stuff. This is putting it on a par. Like all the features that I use from the Phoenix 6 are pretty much in here now, so I can use this. Well, I've been using this for 2 weeks now, and instead of my Phoenix, I've not missed. There's nothing I'm really missing apart from the maps, maybe. But I've still got all the information in this watch that I need. So I think it's fantastic selection of features that have been added.
Yeah, it's great. Couldn't agree more. I think it was a big key point in the first review. It feels like Garmin had kept it back. Yeah. Maybe they could have added it via a software update to the previous Instinct instead of doing this. But at the end of the day, they're now there in this design form, which is really nice. Yeah,
and there's definitely nothing that I can think of in the newer watches or the more expensive watches that I desperately want this to have now. I think it's got everything it needs to do that sort of thing.
Okay, so let's talk verdict. Garmin Instinct 2. We'll start with Nick. What do you think? What's your take? Would you buy it?
This is a really great watch, I think.
Yeah.
I think for its price, there's really not much of anything out there that's packing this many features. I think it's a massive upgrade on the original Instinct. Obviously, the Instinct Solar was already quite a big update, but it's still a fairly big update on the Instinct Solar. There's enough there that might tempt some people to to get this one instead. Literally, the only reason I wouldn't get it is I don't personally love this design. So I think in terms of features, there's nothing here that I'm missing. I think it's a fantastic value. It's like I say, it's like now like a more adventure-focused Forerunner, which maybe has a kind of sleeker, more smart design with things like music. So really, you've got the perfect choice there, I think, in Garmin, in the middle of Garmin's range. Do you want this adventure watch, or do you want the kind of more running-focused Forerunner, which doesn't even have a multi-stalk mode, for example? So can't really think of anything out there at £300. That's the other thing I would say is I would definitely get the 2 and not the Solar. Not just because I live in I think even if you lived in sunny conditions, the battery's so fine on this too that the extra 90 quid and Garmin pay, but that's not an addition I'd use.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really good value watch. I think it does everything that you could ever want from a watch, unless that your focus is design and you want the visual aspects of it. I think it's a very niche watch as well in some ways, because instantly if you went into a watch shop and you wanted a running watch, you can tell like yes or no if you want this watch. It's not like you're going to go, find out a little bit more about it. The design is the big factor of this. So if you want a no frills design where you really care about the features, but you're happy with this sort of look and the black and white, then it's an option for you. If you don't want that black and white thing, you're out. You're not going to get this. You're not going to get this watch. But I think, and as Nick says, I wouldn't buy the Solar. If it was maybe £20 more, £30 more to get the Solar, I might think about it. If it's £100 more, you're getting into the realms of other watches then. And you're not really getting anything more apart from that. The only time I could think that is if you were going to get the Solar is if you were somewhere where you were going to be hiking for 4 weeks or something, and you needed an absolutely perfect watch for not ever charging it, which this would probably do if you were out in the desert for 4 weeks or something like that. But I think it's a fantastic design, and I definitely the other thing I would say as well is the original Instinct came down in price quite a lot over its lifespan. I would still say that £300 at the moment still does feel a little bit pricey for me for this watch. I think if it came in at around 250, maybe a little bit below, I think it's an absolute steal. I think at 300 there's still a question mark whether, because there's a lot of other watches that sit around that mark. And there's some things like the Coros Apex watches around there where they're a bit of a competitor for this. But if this was even lower price, I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a fantastic watch.
Yeah, I think for me, it's one of those watches when I finished testing, I kind of had to step back and think what else is out there that kind of you would compare it to. And things, for me, it was things like the Polar Grit X. When you looked at the price, things like the Coros Apex, not the Pro, which is more expensive because of the kind of more kind of premium materials that you're getting there. And I think if I had to pick from those watches, I would probably go for the Instinct 2. I would probably go for the 2 and not the solar, just because I wouldn't be able to utilize the kind of solar bit, and you only if you've got those conditions to do that for. But I think in terms of getting, really strong battery life, you're getting all the kind of big kind of Phoenix Power Manager features in there as well to improve that battery life further. I think the tracking experience is pretty solid, and if you can get on with the screen and you can appreciate what it can offer in terms of that, then I think that's really strong there. I like the design. I definitely would prefer one of the more colourful options, and there's loads of options in terms of what Garmin is offering in this range as well. So I think you look at the price, you look at what you're getting in terms of, and now you're getting a better running watch than the Instinct and the Instinct Solar. And that's what you were looking from the Instinct 2, then that's what you're going to get from this. So yeah, for me, I actually really kind of enjoyed using this watch. It's one, if I had to use kind of long term, I think I'd be pretty happy, to be honest, in terms of what you get here on Instinct 2 and what you're getting in terms of improvements from the previous Instinct. Okay, so there you have it. That is our multi-test review on the Garmin Instinct 2. Now, if you've got any questions about this watch and our testing, let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos. And yeah, we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.
See you later.